Right. Good evening, everybody. First of all, let us, behalf of myself and Basil, thank you guys for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. We really love giving these kind of lectures because it obliges us to take a pause and actually think about what we would like to tell you guys. It obliges us to think about our architecture and actually what we are doing, because when you are working at your office, you are always facing forwards, always facing the next project, and it's not very often that you look back and have a think about what it is that we have been doing, and especially with our portfolio, which is quite diverse. Sometimes it is difficult to see from the outside what the main feature is that is going through all these designs. So for us, this is also an occasion to think about that and try to explain that to you guys. Who is Graux and Baeyens? As Danielle already told, it's Basil and I, Koen. We've studied together architecture in Ghent, Flanders. After our studies and after our internships, we immediately started our own firm at the age of 24. We were pretty young at that time to start our own office, but that is something in Belgium. There's a very good climate for young architects to start on their own and start with their own firm, because we have an expression in Belgium that every Belgian person is born with a brick in his stomach. What we mean by that, or what people mean by that, is for some reason we all want to build and own our own house. That, and the second thing in Belgium is, maybe it's the same here, that the profession of being an architect is a protected profession. So that means that for everybody who wants to do a reconversion or they want to build a house, you are obliged by law to work with an architect. So that means that there is a lot of work for architects in Belgium, which is nice. So as being young architects, if you're willing to do the small projects that the big firms are not interested in, there is a lot of work. So that was what we did in the beginning. We accepted the small reconversions with small budgets on very small plots, but we saw a challenge in that, and we really loved to do it. And the dialogue that we had in those early days about the meaning of architecture and the necessity of a good solution in a very difficult situation helped us to search for our own language, and it's that same dialogue that's been going on even now throughout all our projects. Now, 13 years later, Graux and Baeyens Architects, it's no longer just Basil and I. We are now a small team of 7, sometimes 8 persons. We are quite a young team, as you can see. The shorts, we even look younger, but that was last week, was maybe the first day we had sun in Belgium, so we all were very excited. Normally, we look more like architects with black shirts and all of that. But, so that's our team, but most of them did their internship at the office and then decided to stay a little bit longer. We really love to work with this young team, especially because working with interns that stay longer, again, we have to talk to them. What is our architecture all about? Start this dialogue all over again, trying to explain what we think is important, how we do the projects and why we do it. And then you start making this story with 7 persons, which makes it even more interesting. It's also quite confronting for us that the interns that enter the office now are already 14 years younger, which is actually the next generation in architecture already, while we believe that we are still very young architects. So we really have to stay sharp. This is our office. Well, it's one section of the office. As you can see, we do not have a clean desk policy. We stopped doing that several years ago because we feel that it's really important for the creativity and for the architecture that all the projects are infecting one another. So everything's been glued to the walls, everything we're working on, all the models are everywhere, all the materials are at the ground, and then you see that some elements from one project get mixed to another project, and you get a really nice crossover between the projects. Model making, very important. You have no place to stack them, so they actually be piled up, and from time to time we have to throw them away because we have no more room. The library, also very important, especially in those days. We all do it. We also watch Pinterest. We also do the Instagram. We want to see what's happening in the world of architecture. But we believe that the real library, that's where the magic happens even more, because then you have this book from a really old architect from 1800 next to a really modern Japanese architect. And once you have these two books combined, something interesting happens. And we feel that if you only go through the websites, less interesting thing happens. So, this office is also the place where we invite our clients to discuss their projects. So the client is also in the middle of the office, in between all the chaos. But what happens is when the client is at the office, that in the beginning they're only talking about nice pictures, what they would like to have for their home, and they only talk about their project. But after a few times, we notice that they start noticing the other projects around them too, and they get really curious. They're like, what are you doing there? It's completely different from what we are doing, but what are you doing? So we start explaining all the different projects that we are working on. And after a while, they really get into the story, what we are trying to tell with our architecture, and we noticed that they are much more open-minded at the end of their project than they were in the beginning. And so it's quite easy to take them to the next level just by showing them the experiment that's going on. So this dialogue between Basil and I has been translated to the dialogue with our colleagues, and is also now a dialogue that we like to do with the clients. This is an abstract painting of a Flemish painter. It's called Clarity, Brightness. It's a painting we often use in our discussions and also with clients. The first time we saw this painting in a museum, we didn't thought much of it. So it's quite big. It's bright in color. It's green. What you see in reality are green horizontal lines that have been scratched in it. And on the left and on the bottom, you have orange-red light that comes through. Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't mind it. I had no opinion about it. It was only when we read the text that was with the artwork that explained what the painter was trying to examine, that it made more sense to us. Because what it said was, the painter asked himself the question, how can I paint brightness? And what he did is he painted in his house the closed shutters in front of the window from the inside on a sunny day. So what you actually see is the horizontal lines of the shutter, and the orange light is actually the light coming through. If you are standing in front of the picture and you see the correct light, this is only a picture of it, and you know the question that's been asked, how can I paint brightness? Then all of a sudden you see the light coming through the painting. Why we like this painting so much is that's what we are hoping to do with maybe this lecture and with the conversations we have with our clients, is by explaining what it is that we are trying to examine, that hopefully we can talk about the architecture and the space and what it's all about. So that's what we would like to do this evening, by showing you what the research is, what the questions that we have been asking throughout the design process. We are hoping to give you an idea what the project's all about. To make this research more visible, we've paired the projects 2 by 2, so there'll be 5 couples of projects that we'll be showing you. Because although sometimes the projects can seem very different from each other, once you put them together, sometimes it's quite obvious to see that that's the DNA of the office, or that's what we are looking for. We chose to start with this project. We deliberately took an interior project and put it next to one of our housing projects, because we would like to emphasize that in the design process, for us, there is no difference between interior architecture or, I don't know what the opposite is, regular architecture or normal architecture, I don't know. So on the left side, you see a loft we did. On the right side, it is a freestanding house. As well as the loft, as well as the freestanding house, are actually two studies on the same problem. That is, what do you do with a project when there's too much ask for square meters, too much volume for actually the open space? So what we try to do is make a nice balance between how can we let the light and the open space, how can we let the light break open the volumes? It will be more clear, I hope. So this is this first project, the loft. This is the outside of the loft. Typical industrial building, yeah, in Flanders. What they do, somebody buys it and he chops it up into as much rooms as he can. I think in this one there are 18 so-called lofts. Because what happens is you only get 3 or 4 of those windows, then they divide it into walls. As a buyer, you go and have a look at it. It looks amazing. You have this high ceiling. It looks wide. You have these nice windows on one side. You have beautiful columns and one front door. And the people say, yes, I've bought a loft. And then they want to live like Andy Warhol with just a bed on one side and a shower on the other side. And we're like, yes, it's a nice loft. We see why you bought it. And then we ask them, so what would you like to do with the loft? What is your program? And then they start, yeah, we would like to have 2 bedrooms. We would like 2 bathrooms. We don't like it if you open the door that you are immediately in the house. We would like a separate office, and next to the kitchen, if possible, some extra storage room. So what they actually want is just any classic house as anybody else have. The main thing of our office is also that we respect whatever the clients want. We are not architects that are going to tell persons how they have to live. If they want 2 separate bathrooms for their 2 kids, whatever, we don't mind. That's not what architecture is all about. That's our opinion. What is our job, we believe, is combine whatever they are asking with the qualities of the downsides of this plot. So in this case, the search was how we can combine this way too complex or dense program into this loft without killing it. So this is actually the scheme of when we were designing what we wanted to do with it. So on the previous pictures you see the nice windows we have, they are only on one side. All the rest of the rooms are blind. So it's even worse than a row house. In a row house you at least have some light at the beginning and light at the back. In this case you just have light at one side. So if you imagine that the windows, this is the plan, the windows are at the bottom side. We decided to mold all the closed rooms to the walls to let the light enter in the open space. So we designed it as if we would design a patio woning, a patio house. Is patio English? Yeah. So, yeah. Is it Spain? Okay. So this is what you actually see. So what we did is we did not touch the windows. We made open space in the interior as if it were a garden or something like that. And then we pushed all the necessary closed spaces to the walls. By doing so, we did not touch any of the columns, which would be very logical to use because we have 2 floors. So every other loft immediately used the columns, bolted some extra steel against it and use it to do the floors. We decided, no, we did not want to do it. We want to show the ceiling. We want to show the columns. So this is the plan. Above, you are entering the loft. Immediately, your sight gets blocked by the staircase. The staircase we choose to put inside the volume because it adds to the magic that you don't see the staircase. And then everything else, the toilets, the kitchen, the storage is on the side. The other side you have office, you have fitness he wanted. And then above you have on the right side the master bedroom with a bathroom, and on the left side the kids' room with another bathroom. This plan and this playing with the walls allowed us to make a more dense program on the first floor than it was because we needed more closed rooms on the first floor because of the bedrooms and all of that. By stacking those two together, this is actually a foam model we made to see what happens when the light enters from one side and what the shadows would do, because we always use 3D modeling, but rendering, and we also use cardboard models because our belief is that if you have the two of them, then you really can compare, and the two ways of research have their values and their downfalls. So here you see on the above, the first floor is really coming together, but it's no problem because the light enters, and because of the curved walls, it's like a curtain that we put in there. The light becomes shadow, becomes light again, becomes shadow again. But you still see the old structure. Originally, we wanted to keep all the old elements red brick and the steel, just the steel color. But the client really loved the white, unfortunately, so he painted everything white. But luckily, we said then, okay, but then we have to find a new contrast. And then he was willing to search with us for a material we could use for the walls. So here you can see that we just built like it's a house. There's more steel in there than in most of our houses, just not to touch the columns. Then on the second floor you see the ground floor of the rooms, and on the last picture you see how everything's being built. And this is actually a detail of the material that's being used onto the sheetrock walls. What's it called? Time. Thank you.
Closer you get, more detail. It was a long search to get this. I think it's 7 or 8 layers.
We're actually quite happy that the client decided to paint everything white, but it's important as a designer, we believe that if they are doing something you dislike, okay, start play with it, see what the next challenge is, not just say, okay, you painted it white, there goes the model, we just don't put it on the website, no. So the next project is actually the same problem. Freestanding house. Again, the ask of the client is that he wanted too much square meters for the plot. So this is not all of the plot. The plot is just the white squares you see in the middle on the bottom side of the river. It's quite an expensive plot around our city because it's a really wanted place because of the river, and the other side of the river it's nature, wetlands, so you don't see any houses for miles and miles. So it's an expensive plot. The downside of this expensive plot is that the client also he wanted quite a big house. So he wanted 5 bedrooms, for instance, on the first floor. But the plot is not that big. So our problem was, how do we manage this massive block of square meters? How do we break it open? And how do we let the light enter? So again, there's a nice balance between open space and closed space. So because of the view at the back, we wanted to position as much of the living spaces to the end, to have this nice view. But the downside of this plot was also that the sun was at the left side, and the front and the left. So if you would be sitting at the back of the house looking towards the wetlands, and you would not have any sunlight. So what we did, we made a very monolithic volume on 3 sides. Almost feels like a castle, strong, very protective for its inhabitants. But then on the other side of the house, it opens like a flower blossom would open to the sun. So there you see on the side of the sun, you have these incisions. Again, in the previous design, it was more of a gentle gesture. Here it's been cracked open. But these cracks let the sunlight, the direct sunlight at midday, enter the house. So the view is at the bottom, at the top. The light enters from the left. What we like about these kind of studies is that people see our projects without the plans. They think like, oh, if we build with Graux and Baeyens, everything's going to be crooked and everything. All walls, there's no wall will be straight or anything like that. But if we show them the plan, they understand what game we are playing. All of our rooms are actually very straightforward, very logical to design, but it's only the spaces in between. It's the circulation that's been in a strange angle. So there's no problem for will the bed of my kid fit in his room? Of course it will. And will I be able to put any closets? Yes, of course. So these are the renderings from the patio on the left side. The first image is what you would see, what you will see if you enter the house and the light is coming towards you. The materialization, what you see is also that the 3 brick volumes continue to the ground. We also use the outside brick on the inside because we really wanted to feel that you are moving in between those 3 massive volumes. But the black volume, which you'll see in the pictures, the volume that is in between is a very light structure with a wooden structure. And we also use this structure to give some sort of direction into the ceiling. So you see the brick volume coming through down, and then the black very small volume, very light. So the front of the house is the right picture with the entrance, because the owner also wanted a place to put his car. Very closed, not giving away any of the privacy. But then the other side is really open to the landscape. And then in these joints where the light enters, you see that there's, can I point with this? Yeah. Here you see that the light enters through a skylight, so you have your view to the back, but the light is coming from behind you. This is just a detail of these 3 volumes. They are not actually touching each other. They are 5 centimeters apart from each other. So once every day, when the sun goes through the glass, it goes through the other glass, and then it goes through the building, and you have this really thin line. And then baseline are looking, look how cool, nobody else noticed, but we are really happy with that line. But we believe that this actually thin line, well, it makes a difference if you are standing at the outside of the house, especially because it is so massive. It needs this kind of little detailing, a little bit of poetry inside.
All right. Next topic, we're going to talk about building skins. You see 2 projects. One is a new construction, and the other one is a reconversion. As an architect, the building skin is very important. It's actually the border between inside and outside. It's a protection against the weather. It's also a transition between public and private. And it's a way of giving expression to a building. Or you choose to be very generic and decoration, or it can mean something more. Express something to the outside world, what happens actually in the building. Because most of the buildings we make are private buildings, and you have to be invited to go inside. So it's a choice what you do with it. Starting from the kind of brief you get or the kind of building you get, it's a new construction or not. So This is the topic, and the first project is the new one. So here you see already a picture of this pretty expressive building. What we liked about it, what it combined for us, was that it's, in the first, it's the protection. The skin is the protection for us in the first place, against everything. Then it has a concept that I will explain later. It also involves the stability of the house. What you see is actually the burial structure of this house, and also its expression. So the house is located along the water, like you see. It's along canal, straightforward. It connects two major cities in Belgium, and the plot is pretty long. The choice of building it there was not ours, it was obliged. So, but it was important because we wanted to obtain the views on the water and the wet fields also in front of it. So this is a section of the plot. Like you see, the ground floor is 2 meters lower than the dike, the road. So it was pretty obvious to make the living spaces on the first floor, the bedrooms on the second, and we use the ground floor as a sort of transition room. The entrance is there, going from the public to your private parts. The ground floor, here actually you can, it's what I told you before, but the concept is already in there. So what we wanted to do is pretty simple. You want to create vistas, to frame the views. In the front we have the beautiful waterfronts and the fields, and on the back the trees and the garden. So how are you going to frame it and at the same time get privacy towards your neighbors? So and the intimacy that a house needs towards the openness. So on the first floor we have terraces, and the whole walls open up from very close in the corners, open up towards these terraces. So it's filtering the light to the more intimate parts, and the central core of that's the staircase and the practical zones of it divides actually the whole rooms. This one open space gets then a bigger living space and a smaller dining space, and so forth. On top we have a lot of bedrooms, so they want it's a whole different approach how we divided it. Here you see how the light is getting in, and we chose already in the construction to take pictures, because there you have already the whole concept mixed. Everything is there. So there's no addition that you have to do except the windows to get your protection against the weather, but everything is already there. The choice of using concrete was pretty obvious. It's the most effective way to make the whole structure stand. So it's a 30 centimeter wall, reinforced concrete, a lot of reinforcement. Everything is carried down to these two columns that are stacked on top of each other. I mean the building layers, and the core of the house gives the stability of it all. We chose to work with planks, wooden planks, that we just divided, or the position in between is just one nail. And the nail, when you pour the concrete on the right way, it goes on between these planks and gives some strange, nice features like this. And when the light touches it, it really gets very tactile. So you have a really robust, a strong building, but at the same time you want to touch it. It's really, it's a tactile thing. And here in the sun, you see how the light's playing with it. Here you already see the line of where the glass will be. I think it's here, yeah. And the division with the central core of the separate rooms inside the main plan. This is how it looks today. Polished concrete with a little bit of sand color in it, and plaster, lime plaster also. Getting a little bit more rough, so we have to insulate the whole building. of course. The building regulation at that point are very strict in Belgium. So it's 20 centimeters EPS that we used. And yeah, 20 centimeters. And it's all plastered. But once you get the different layers on it, it's really subtle, it's different. It's not like a traditional plaster, it's more ductile, it's more colorful, deeper. And here, the openness, the framing of the lights and the views. The terraces. All materials are natural materials. Wood, steel, galvanized steel, really pretty rough materials. Hopefully, normally the provisions are that in August they're gonna move. So it will be finished. It's already a project we worked on 4 years. In the beginning we couldn't build it. It was not allowed, so we went higher and higher in the hierarchy of the city halls, and at the end it was allowed to build it, and the neighbors were already started 2 years after we, and will finish before us, but yeah, and this is how it looks. Next project is completely different. It's a row house. Actually more a corner house, 19th century building. It's a generic building. Here, all the cities in Ghent have a sort of a belt around the medieval city from the 19th century. All small houses, they have like 4 or 5 topologies of houses, smaller and something bigger, but they all look like that. Usually when the people are not interested in buying corner houses because they have no garden. But the reason why it's barred is this. It's a fantastic view, 200-300 meters of water in front of it. The west side, it's actually the old harbor of Ghent. The boatmen, old boatmen who are in pension still live there. It's a real piece of, how you say, there's no gentrification yet in this kind of neighborhoods. It starts now, but it's at that time not. It was really nice to do some project there. So the fabric of the city gets really interesting because it's located on a corner. You have a small street too, who is completely different than the big views you have here. And so the question was, how can we play with this historical membrane we have, the skin, and do the alteration we want to do with a lot of respect for it. So basic concept was to keep this membrane and to empty it. The only thing we kept were the interesting part was a staircase and the A-shaped beams in the roof. And we added new volumes, closed volumes. And actually you have to wander through these volumes to get where you need to go. And then you stack everything together. The plan, we turned everything upside down. Ground floor are the bedrooms. There was the least amount of lights. We kept the bedrooms. There's also a tram passing by, so sometimes when there are 2 or 3 of them stopping, they are standing in front of it, so that's why everybody in the street has curtains, because you have 40 people watching in your living room. So by putting actually your living room on top, you have much more light. You don't need any curtains. It's a beautiful view. So the living space on the first floor with the bathroom, and then, and here we have the kitchen combined with a terrace. A view from the garden of the neighbor towards the small streets, and this is one of these incisions we made. A big window, and in the front, same thing. These are the only 2 things we did, and the plaster just fell off during the construction. It was poorly done, so we chose to take it all away and give it a new layer, just with calais. I don't know how you say it, sort of cement thing with colored. And this is the entrance. Big door. You can invite a lot of people to come in, but What's interesting is two things, actually. That's, first of all, when you change the dynamic of a house, that is the living room is not on the ground floor, and you invite people, you don't want any signs in your building. Putting signs means that it's badly done, in our opinion. So when you invite people there, automatically they go further because it's in a triangular shape, and they go towards the end, and then there's a staircase inviting you. But from the other side, you have a framed view on a sort of a garden. This, we just received a picture today via Facebook. This was a house that was bombed in 45, the garden, and never rebuilt. And when you pass there, you don't notice this garden. It's sort of a small fabric in the city, and everybody ignores it. But when you frame it, it starts to have another level of it. Something ugly can become something beautiful because you focus on it. And then all the flowers and the plants are there during the seasons change, and it really becomes a picture. Once you go up, one of these volumes blocking your view, but the light is filtering through. So it attracts you to go and have a look. And that's when you turn around on the right side to enter the living room. And this is what you get. Small space, not so big, but through these windows and the light, it's really pulling you there. This canvas always worked really well. It was I lived there for myself, and it was a fantastic place to live in. You had a lot of intimacy, because also the colors we played with, but a beautiful view on the water, and everybody had the intention to walk towards this canvas and step into it. It's not by coincidence there's a little step towards it, because it creates a sort of a dynamic, an extra, really, making the step gives you another feeling of how you get into something. And it's also used when a lot of people to sit down. My son was playing here always with his toys. Or you can read a book. And then on the top, also the choice of keeping this facade. A lot of people asked, why didn't you tear it down so you have a panoramic view? But that's just the whole interesting points. From here you have these old windows that frame again the same view you have, but on a different level. The left window was all the boats who were parked that you saw. You have really just that. Then the water side, and from here the picture is not really well. When you're more on the right, you see all the chimneys actually here, but they are standing there. So it's fragmented, your view. And once you step on the terrace, again you have a panoramic view. So every level focuses on a different aspects, even though sometimes they're the same, but by framing it differently, you enlight something else of it. And something that's not on the picture on the left, it's a really small one, and you go look behind all the buildings that are made in Belgium. Typical, you have the major house, and then everybody builds some crappy shit on the back of it. And it's really, actually, it starts to be beautiful when you watch it. And some shots to show what the house was like. There was the original A-shaped. The terrace was, the form of the house was kept. Just by slicing one piece of it, you get an interesting terrace and an interesting visual shape of the house from the outside, but actually it's nothing special about it. It's just slicing one piece of it. Kitchen block, a bathroom, and the two bedrooms. My son's bedroom was really small, 7 square meters, but he always used the entrance room as a sort of extra room to play. So the entrance, the hallway is becoming more than just a practical thing. Then the two next projects is titled Strangeness versus Familiarity. These projects are really similar for us, although they look very different. The left one is new construction again, and the right one is a reconversion or a refurbishment with extension. Here, the brief of the client was really interesting. He came up to us, I want a normal house, nothing special about it, except the fact that I want all the places, all the functions to be separated, but still together. We didn't quite get it in the beginning, what he meant. How are you going to do that? Or you work in an open space like a loft or the kitchen, or you work everything separate like they did before with a door. So that triggered us. What can we do with it? And usually this is one of the major things where you work on, the orientation. But here we had another one as, I think this is, yeah, is the building regulations. We know them, usually they're all the same, but here we had a special thing. They were all big plots. There used to be one big castle on top of this plot that was bombed in 45. And so they divided in all plots of 6,000 square meters. And this was the first plot that they divided again in 3,000 square meters. Still a big plot, I think 2,500 or 600, doesn't matter. So everybody was against it, the 50 or 60 houses. So our limitations were really strict. 3 meters, 50, pitched roof, the archetype. Nothing more than the archetype. And we were not allowed to put some dorms. I think they are called dorms, the little chapels on the houses. And the client also told he doesn't want a skylight, Velux, Facro, something like that. So how to get all these separate and open rooms and the light without having the traditional way of doing it. So we thought a lot about it, how we're gonna make this, and the idea came up when we start to fold it a little bit, and certainly when we made these incisions. 2 incisions on both sides of the facades to where the light can come in towards the whole building. And this is actually the frame, the backbone of the house, this scheme. We're really proud of this plan because it's incorporating a lot of what we do. For example, all the rooms here are actually completely separate from each other, but through these openings, you can have a diagonal view from one side of the house to the other side of the house, from left to right, internally too. And every room can be separated by doors, sliding doors, everything is put away, but it's very dynamic. And this is the reality of the plan. And again, by making a symmetrical building, you have actually no back, no front, but the environment is different. So the interaction between your environment and your building is completely different, even though the facade are the same. So by having this building obliged to be built on the back, and we couldn't make any hole in the wall, we have to enter the house to the front, and then we decided to have the entrance on the back. Here's a picture of what we couldn't do here. And it looks actually really a modern building with modern materials. But on the other hand, it's really familiar because it's based on the archetype we all know. That's something, it started there and we played much more with it in the past couple of years. And this is the back. The interaction between the wall and the building is really completely different. The entrance room, so you see big windows that let the light through the side of the building. We like this picture because it's like the tree is growing in the building through the reflection. And it's one of the major things we have in our project. It's really hard to photograph. We seem to make architecture that's really difficult to photograph. So, like most architecture or interior architecture, you have to be there to really feel it. So they all try to do their best, but from this point, you see on the right the garden, but here you can also, if you move a little bit, you see the castle wall. You can see through the dining room, actually in the entrance space. So you have a diagonal view from everywhere. Use of the materials are pretty simple: wooden floors, Carrara marmor floors, and here on the top, all the bedrooms have huge windows like this, and this is a sliding system to separate the bedroom. So if everything is open, it's like one big loft, or how you gonna call it, one big open space. But still, it can be separated. The carpets, something that worked really well. When you come up this house, the sound really starts to be damped, and it gives this different feeling about it. So it really matches well with the functions we have there. With the master bedroom and the dressing. And this is a refurbishment. Just a typical farmhouse. We really loved to work on this project. It really felt natural to work in it. It flowed really, the idea flows pretty quickly. So what we see here from the picture is this is the plot. Here we have some fruit trees, old fruit trees. You come down the mountain, and it's actually in this corner and it comes up again. We were mesmerized by the picture when you came there. In front of it, these, strange again in Belgium, we have all kind of regulations, but these are all row houses. Although it's really on the countryside, they're all row houses. So that means that our building is the view they have. So they were all interested in what we're going to do with the building. And certainly when we saw the building, he said, yeah, but I want to tear it down and I want to make a new construction. So we were a little bit shocked. I said, no, we'll propose something else. So we started sketching. These are some of the ideas that we had. Here you see one of the first stages we had to add. This is the basic volume, maybe to explain. This is a bread house. There was the oven where they made the bread. This is a stable, and this was a 3-generation old house. The farmers still lived in there when the client bought it. We saw them several times, an old guy with his brother. So it's really authentic. So in this picture, this is the house and this is a stable. And we wanted to add something here with a fantastic view on the trees that you see here. It's coming up again. This is the tectonic we wanted to play like the traditional house. Everything was really simply built. Walls, you stack wood, and then you stack something else, and one piles up the other. But also this primary idea is quickly developed in playing with different blocks. And so the joints in between start to be more and more important, and that's what you see here. Possibilities, how to connect everything to one each other, sort of a patio, how two buildings do not touch, like the 5 centimeters Koen talked about, but then more, and how it's going to be supported. So these was all these ingredients we played with. And this was the final organigram, how you say it. So we have an eating house, a sleeping house, and a day house. But what's most important is what happens here, 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 and here, in between the volumes. Not what's happening there. Because this is it's cluster of buildings, and that idea of clustering a building and adding more, it's like making a little village. But in between these houses are squares. Sometimes you can make a garden feeling like it was here. We didn't touch anything. There was no really design of the garden necessary. Here it's going to be more, it's a south. We designed something to it, sort of big terraces, and this is more like the old farm like it felt. Just the only thing it needed was one tree in the middle, and it worked perfectly. Again, sketches next to the reality. These were the primary sketches we made. A central big chimney, house needs chimneys, we think. It divided the living room with a sort of an office, and then here the big view on these trees. And there's the connection between the eating, the former house with this, and the bedrooms. This is the former house, or the eating house we call it, with the A-shaped beams, the original ones. We think about the chimneys like they are made. We put a sculptural chimney there too. And all the materials we use are referring to what This is a Spanish floor. All the tiles are really different. They go from 29 centimeters to 31 centimeters. So we all had to be selected so that the rows could be made without having one on each other sticking out. And the final plan, the technical plan, with here and the result of it. So first, people and friends and architects asked us when they saw that, are you changing style? Are you doing something else? Are you doing old buildings or something? But for us, this is as contemporary as the one before. It's not the materials that determine if something is contemporary, it's the way you play with light, with the rooms, with the interaction of rooms. We made some 3D technical buildings, so we have no cold bridges and stuff like that, so it was really complex to make something look simple. We always compare it with dancing. When it looks easy to dance, it must be very difficult. And some of the pictures here inside. The connection again, you look through the building to the garden. From here you have the patio where the light comes through. On the right, the bedroom area, the corridor towards it. Voilà.
These next two projects are two new houses we are doing in the city tissue. Things are changing a bit for the moment in Belgium because they are changing the laws and they are trying to stop new lands being developed. So there will be a concrete stop, they call it, in 2020, which means that all the nice plots for the nice houses are finished. We don't mind it because, as they say it, Belgium is already fully built, and it's quite true. But the interesting part is that now people are looking towards all the leftover places in the cities where to build a house. So you get these really strange plots where nobody else before thought of putting a house are now being sold as plots to put on a house. What we like about that is that you really have to be creative to use these shitty plots and make something really cool out of it. So this is what some parts of Flanders look like. You have a row or a canal and then all houses next to each other. So if you are taking a road, you don't even see anything of the landscape. You only see row houses and all the landscape is behind it. That was actually also the case in the plot we got. You really have to look for the plot in the pictures. It's in the middle, the little green, little piece of the garage was actually, and then the little plot next to it. It's a very good plot. But we liked it because, again, a nice thing is on the front you have this really nice view on wetlands again. No house will be built there, but it's not allowed anymore. On the right side you have these typical row houses, and on the left side, all of a sudden, it's no longer a row house, but it's a freestanding house. So we had to come up with a design. We found it important that we gave an answer to this very strange situation. We did not want to make yet another row house. We wanted to make a facade that could continue what's happening in between those two buildings. So what we decided to do was, since it's all one facade next to another, we decided to continue this story and pull it inwards our plot. And like that, we made a sort of dialogue with the other house that is standing next to it. A very important reason for us to make this kind of architecture was also because of the sunlight. The sunlight was at the side of the house and at the back of the house. So we needed this facade to put in the windows. So here you actually feel the narrowness. We only have 3 meters between our building and the wall that is dividing the two plots. But again, this wall, which is an old element, we really appreciate it. For us, it doesn't have to be something modern in aluminium or black or whatever. we can appreciate this kind of wall. Especially if you combine it with the curtain again we made in brick, something cool is happening. 3 meters, it's really too narrow to put a wall next to another wall. But because of the tilted movement we made, something interesting starts to happen. Again, all the crooked lines is very logical once you see the plan, because what we are doing is connecting 3 identical square volumes, connect them to the corners and break open and open the volume like that. So in the first volume, we have the office of the client. It's a landscape architect. So here is his office, and this is the dining room, this is the living room, and here is the kitchen. And then this V shape is again a patio to put a tree and let the light in. This other triangular shape here is where we put the staircase to go to the top. So you almost have no hall or nothing like that in this house, because all the rooms are connected at the corners. It was quite similar like that in the copper house. You immediately go from one room to another. So at the outside of the house, we wanted to make it really clear, the 3 volumes, so we choose the last volume. This one is where the living area is. Here is the patio in between those 2 volumes. And then those 2 front volumes, we decided to make an accent out of it, make it more readable by putting again another chimney. We really like chimneys in houses for stuff like that. Thanks to this movement we made, it was possible to put in windows that are no longer facing immediately the corner, but they look away from the next neighbor. So here you see the plan. On the right, it's a study or what we wanted to do with the connection of those 3 volumes, because here where they are connected and here where they are connected, you wanted to move through, but we really want to make it visible what we were doing with the architecture. So we designed 2 concrete elements, and here you can see them. So this is the concrete element on the left side when you are standing in the night hall, looking to the front door, and you see this concrete element that's actually also a load-bearing element for what is on top of it. And then the other connection is here, is connecting this place is the living area, the kitchen is here, and on the right you have the dining room, and this is the glass of the patio where I'm standing next to. So again, you have these 3 separate spaces that have their own quality, but they are connected at the points with this very large element above you. What we like about this materialization of the project is that you have real rough elements, such as this concrete element, but also the concrete beams we used for the ceiling. We just kept them. We did not put any plaster on it. We just paint them white. But then the kitchen has this really light messing metal elements in it, some tiles and some veneer. And here you see that although this neighbor is very close by, this very large window is looking towards the gardens, and you don't have immediate interaction with the neighbor. So this is a really large window. It's 4 meters high. It was not possible, no, we didn't want to put anything in there to open, so all the opening windows are behind these claustras we designed here. So here there's also a window which gives some light in the night hall, but we didn't want some glass there because it's only facing the neighbor. It took us quite some study to make this design, because it can't actually be built. The first one we drew was very similar to it, but we got a phone call from the guy who was doing it, and he said it can't be done. And actually, when he showed us on the construction site what we built, there was no more space to put the bricks, and so we had to really study that it would not fall apart and still was strong enough to remain, but it's still standing. This other house, this is not the house, it's the plot next to it. So this is again in the city of Ghent, an example of a plot that was never building ground. It was the garden of the house next to it. So this wall has been for probably 30 years. And now the owners of the right plot decided to sell a piece of the plot. So this house, the garden is from that house, and this is what we built next to it. So it's a new family house in the city of Ghent. We found it really important not to make some closed facade. We think it's nice if you can open up to the city, especially because the direct sunlight is at the front of the house. So at the first floor, here we have the kitchen. Here is the living area, and we wanted the terrace to have on the front side, on the sunny side. This is the bathroom. You don't need a terrace there, but it was nice in the design. And it's nice, it's practical to clean your windows. Another thing was that this space isn't just not large enough to put in a car. So what we did is we pushed back the front of the house, the wooden wall, only by 2 meters, and so it was sufficiently to put a car in front of the house, which is very valuable in a city context. So this is actually a row house. It's not a semi-detached house. But what we did not want to do was create some ugly thing like this where Belgium is full of. I think in every street you find stuff like this. Just a semi-detached house waiting to be built against, but nobody builds against it because the ground is, so it's really ugly. For us, so it was really important for us not to do so. So what we decided to do is take the cheapest material they always use for the cladding, which is just gray slates. And we chose to use that material to put it also on our roof. So the design becomes one whole. And then the rest of the terraces we choose again to use with concrete. It's like we always use concrete, but we do use it a lot. But here you see how it's actually been built. So the house looks like a complete concrete building where we just put this little foil over of slates, but it's actually a regular house with red bricks. But in front of it, there's this concrete element. What we like about this concrete is that it's honest. The structure is what it is. It looks like it is. It does not need anything more. It's just been polished on the surface, so it's good to use. So this is the plan, the ground plan here. You see what we did. Again, every floor has the same tilted glass view. At the back, we did the same with the window. It's been repeated. And at the back again. And in the beginning, we used exact lines here to create the staircase. Again, a triangle shape, because on one hand, we needed the space to put in the stair, but on the other hand, we wanted to be as close as possible to make a connection between the front space, the kitchen, and the back space, the living room. So here you see the concrete staircase going all the way up and making a connection from the living room through this void to the room at the back. So here you see the back of the house at the right picture is identical from the front of the house. And this is this concrete element, so we've used this concrete element at the front of the house and at the back of the house, and then we decided to make this really raw, strong element, the staircase, in the center of the house, because it combines very well, we believe, with the more soft touches of the rest of the interior. And that is what we really like, that if you have this structural element, which can be robust, and then you combine it with some different gentle materials, and you get a really nice combination, which make it more difficult, we believe, to make it too modern, or that you get too bored with it after 2 years. Then those two last projects are two reconversions. What we like to show you with those two projects is how we decide sometimes, although the clients ask us to demolish something, that we try and look for the qualities in the existing situation. So again, a typical Flemish, really old house. Obviously, the question of the client was demolish it, especially the two lost houses, get rid of it, and give me something modern with a lot of glass. When we went to visit the site, and we drove back at the office, we've both had the same feeling that we really liked the two little houses for some reason. It's really charming. It fits really well in the environment. There are more buildings like that in the surroundings. So we thought, couldn't we keep that for some way? Especially when we started to look at the plan. This is the existing situation on the left side. The orientation is that this terrace is actually a very good terrace for the sun and the wind and all of that. So what we saw in this plan and what we wanted to do with it in the middle is all the rooms that we needed here, a nice little nook for watching television, a living area, the kitchen and a dining table. Everything was already in this plan. And also the terrace where it was needed was also in that plan. So this gave us another reason to decide that what we liked in the first place, those little charming sheds, and we saw the plan, it was like, yes, we did not want to demolish it. The only thing it needed was, our opinion was, in the ground plan, we needed some sliding doors here to let in the glass, to let in the light. So the right is actually the scheme we sold to the client, showed to the client, as if this is something we really like. Because this is something also we do in a lot of our projects, that it doesn't have to be one open space, we like it. If there's one space here and there's another space there, and they are only connected through a small corner. So this is what we did. We put in this glass, and for us that was already enough to make the whole ground floor work. So here you see the connection between the front and the back. We chose not to use concrete this time, but we used wooden beams. There's a column here also in the same wooden, in the same sections. And so the glass could here be glass and glass without a structure in the corner. So what we like about this is that the way you can look at the existing situation can also be that you decide to keep more than you would expect. Of course, there are some other issues that has to be solved in this project. There's not enough light in this old house. And then we decided to take this element of the roof and start designing on that part. And the combination of the two, a quite modern roof, but with a really classic structure underneath, if you combine those two, we believe that again you get something that has this little twist. So there was a room at the front that needed a window, excuse me, yeah, there it is. There was at the back a bathroom that needed a window, so that's over there. And then the two rooms we actually kept here, we didn't create them. We wanted to give it morning light because of the dining room and because of the kitchen. So we designed those two elements. So then a model, for us the model, very important that the material of the facade was also on the model, because you really get to feel the dimension and the texture of it. So this is what happens with the triangle window and what happens in the bathroom with that window. You get really a lot of morning light in there. And this is actually the view from the back, from the starting point, this normal shaped house, but now with a little bit off-shaped roof. And this is the front of the house. So if you pass by it with your car, you wouldn't even notice. You'd think, yeah, just another house in the row. But once you give it a second look, you feel, there's something's going on there. This last reconversion, the same situation. This was the facade. It's a psychology practice, where at the bottom we had to make room for 5 psychologists, and at the first floor it had to be a single family house. Here we weren't even allowed to touch the facade. It was protected. We didn't mind. They allowed us to paint it. That's a good This is the back of the house, so really crappy. It's been renovated. Oh, wow. Okay. It's been renovated somewhere in the 80s, something like that. It has nothing to do with the front of the house. So they kept an old shed and an old wall. No reason why. So the first thing we decided again was have a look at the existing plan and try and come up with some sort of decisions. What do we think about that plan? Do we like it? Can we keep something of it? Obviously, we like the rhythm of the front. What we decided is that we made it even more classical, more straightforward than actually the original plan. We demolished everything and we tried to make a plan which is actually more suitable, if you ask us, with the facade, as if it would have always been like that, the house. So this is a ground plan. Thanks to this very logical division, you get an entrance here in the middle and you get 5 rooms for the psychologists around it. And then at the first floor, again, we play with the back. The front facade has been repeated at the back, although it was completely demolished. There was no windows there whatsoever. We decided to make it identical and then introduce these beams and these 2 round staircases to make it more of a classical plan. So this is the ground floor. You see 2 entrance doors through the practices for the psychologist. You see also the newly introduced beams here, which gives some sort of division. This was a sketch we made for what we wanted to do with the back wall, with the new windows, and also play again with the structure of the wooden beams. They are all new, but we decided that we wanted to show the structure because it's a really nice contrast between the new walls. What we like in this project that it's no longer visible what is the reconversion and what is the new element. That's why we love to do both projects because you get this crossover. Well, everything you see is new. Then at the back of the house again, so the first thing we did is make the original house more classical maybe, so it was very at ease. But there was still a problem at the back of the house. At the first floor you have this practice. You have this family house. The practice is here, and there's quite a big garden behind it. And we wanted to give the garden at the first floor. This is a little riddle. I don't know if you know it. It's quite simple. You have 9 dots, and the question is, how can you connect the dots by only using 4 lines without picking up your point? I hate the riddle because I couldn't find it, but someone told me. So it's quite easy. You start here, you go 1, 2, 3, 4. So the trick is you have to go all the way outside the box, and then it's thinking outside the box. I didn't find it. But what I mean by this is that's actually what we did in this project. So we were trying to find a way, and it really took us quite some time, to connect this house to this garden with respecting the privacy of those practice rooms there. So what we choose to do is we kept this old wall, which was quite charming, and we put this gigantic concrete element on top of it. So we were happy that we could use concrete again. And it looks like this. So here actually, the first exterior space is the patio that's connected to the psychology practices. This is the other side on the private garden. This is a place where you can put your car. This is the staircase to go up. And like this, with this element, you see that the terrace, the private terrace, and the offices respect each other's privacy. And this is the view you have from one of the practices. And you have no view to the back garden, but still you have a very pleasant view on your inner garden.
Last topic is actually what we are working on at this moment. I'm going to show you 5 projects, but shortly, just something quick about it. That are on drawing table, or that we're working with the engineer, or starting to be built. So actually we took everything that was hanging on the wall, and not everything, a few of them, to show you what we were working on. So this is, the first project is a small project, a new construction. Again, typical for Belgium. A lot of green, but when we came to the plot, we only saw houses. You see everywhere houses, and the green is, the gardens are, and the landscape is behind it. The plot is 400 square meters, what is quite small, and our neighbors are really close, and this is a farm, so the only views we could get actually is here, and if we would live on the ground floor, that was the only thing we could have. So the idea was to make a square, small house, 180 square meters. For Belgium normal standards, it's pretty small. And it's on a small hill, so underneath, on the ground floor, so this is how it looked like. Again, a chimney. The sketches that we present in the beginning for the clients. And here you already see, the living area will be here, and sleeping area entrance is here, half in the ground, half on ground level. This is concrete, and this is slabs, slates. The square plan, we only cut off a part of it to accentuate the entrance, to cover it. And so the most dark space are for the most intimate moments. And here we have a wooden structure. Everything that will be wood will be visible. That will be the aesthetic of the house. So we are now together with the engineer. So look, there are really big laminated beams that go from one hand to another, from one side to another, to have the whole support of it. And then the other ones here, everything will be visible. So we love to play with structure and aesthetic that work together. Next one, House BS. It's located in a also countryside and a really small village. A few houses, beautiful views on the back and here. What's interesting about this project, when they came to us, they had they wanted to have a house where they could die. What they mean by that is they are 60 years old and they want to live there for the rest of their life. They don't want to go to a home. So by that, they also added that they wanted to have another house, incorporate them, so sort of a guest house for free for people, small family, to live there, to maintain the garden. The garden would be for them. They would live on the first floor. And if they would be too old, they just go to buy groceries for them and go to the pharmacy. Sort of a deal, free living for some help. So we find it quite interesting. So the choice to live on the top was made by them. But here we see that we choose to, this will be torn down, and here the house will be put. So that maybe in the future, this could be divided for another family to have a house. Not being selfish and putting this one in the middle. And these was the first sketches and the model that was made to the sketch. We felt like, okay, we come to this building, underneath you can park, central, you have the circulation, night parts, day parts, and underneath also the guest house with a lot of terrace around it. Start playing with that. These are some of the models, some with pitched roof, others with flats. We talked about Julian Lampens before, concrete master architect we really love, and I think 90-year-old architect, was one of the inspirations. But we make different models, 3Ds, just to test everything. That's what Koen already told you. We always use every media we have to test what we're doing. Isometry, with, and then the renders we made to give the physical aspect to it. Now we also, the study of the engineer is finished, or practically finished, so hopefully we can start building it in 6 months or 5 months. The other one, the third is a church, like you see. It's a church that was restored 3 years ago completely and burned down 3 months after it. So they didn't know what to do with it. Maybe it's not here, but in Belgium we don't have a lot of people going to church anymore. So they reconverted to restaurants, dancing, skate parks, whatever. But because it's a really small village, it meant a lot. All these families had been married there, buried, baptized. So for the local people, it didn't feel right to do it. So they thought rebuilding is maybe too expensive and it's too big for this. And then it started to be competition because the city hall here in front of the square already had a few years not enough room. So they had some bureaus and the apartments around it. So they decided, can we do something together? Make actually the city hall partly in the church together with the church. What we found very interesting. So they make an international competition about it, and everybody can inscribe it. There was a selection of, I think, 10 offices and then 5, and we participate and we won this project. So that's the first competition in a long time we participated, and certainly an international one. I'm going to be really brief about it because it has a big story, but what we did was in these inner walls, again the skin, we added 2 volumes. The only brief, one of the only briefs they had is there should be a separation, a physical barrier, a wall in between the both of them, because actually it's water and fire in the same building. Normally a church and the city hall are not really fun of each other, but it made it more interesting. And we put a 3rd volume here, a sort of a canopy connection between this new or this addition of the city hall and the old one, so there is a connection. This is a picture of the church. The back part will be completely restored like it was, and from here on, from the tower on, it's our part actually. And we put a canopy, a sort of a plateau inside of it that looks from the top like this. Because this church has been amputated, normally it's much longer, we have to give it a new direction. And don't give it a new identity again, and without this feeling of being amputated. And this restores actually this balance. It works really well. And yeah, but it has different layers to it. It also need to be for concerts. So here you have the choir, the singing people, and the org should be here. And it was also used for exhibitions and for concerts. So people, I think you can have like 500 or 600 people for a classical concert. This is the front part. We stacked several layers. It's really compact, really dense, but by making patios here and there, we do not touch the wall, the existing wall, as much as we want. We didn't want to touch this wall because it has a lot of patina, a lot of history. It burned down, and this whole burning texture that's on the wall, we wanted to keep it as much as possible because it's part of the history of the city. And there are some images, here the staircase in the spatio, and a dramatic image. We didn't show that to the clients, it was too Halloween spooky, but yeah, that's the canopy we made. But what's interesting about it, this is a typical roof that you would see on this kind of church, but by making these incisions here and there, the patios that are located here and located there have a lot of light going through. And also it refers at the situation it's today. There is no roof, there's nothing anymore, just the outside walls. So it's a sort of a reminiscence about how it looks today. This is an artist studio, Steve de Smet. This was his brief. Imperfect, honest, modest, and humble. Big texts, but still we have to start drawing. And we created actually a center volume, an honest volume, because everything which we were building with, you will see it. It's symmetrical, it's huge, because it will be needed for big sculptures that we will make. And so it has a big scale. And we introduced here a bench and a smaller window. Actually, when you stand up, it comes a little bit too low for your vision. So the first feeling you have is to bend over to see what's behind it. And by creating this bench, you want to sit down immediately. And it's in another scale, it's more intimate scale in comparison to the bigness of this square. A render that we made in the beginning and how it looks today. This is the bench that I mean, and the window. Around this square we have a study room and kitchen and a sort of a perimeter wall around it. The model. And again here the corner window with the big doors so they can bring in these sculptures and the light can penetrate. And last one, House T. It's a typical suburb like you would see in America also, big streets, a lot of trees and big houses. Our plot is this, all these trees, actually half of it. We love these trees when we saw it. We thought, oh, why build a house there? But yeah, usually when you give you this kind of assignment, the building regulations allow you to put a block, one big block, so it didn't feel right for us. So the idea here was to sort of scatter the building over the plots, over the totality of the plots. So we made 3 separate geometrical volumes, some small scale up, and then we gradually worked it out. So the front of it, you enter here. This is a music studio, and in the basement you have the mixing studio. He likes to play music in a band. The living area with terrace. It's a quarter of a circle. It's to create more distance toward the neighbors. You orientate yourself towards the house, the sun. And on the back, the sleeping areas. And a few renders. We wanted to lift the whole building up so that the trees could still grow and the roots could go under the building. And this is the entrance. In between the intersection, we get to the entrance. Some details we worked on. Everywhere there are some sketches. Okay, if you have to make a gutter, how we're going to make it. This is actually the tip point of a paper, how you say it, plane, a paper plane, where you can bend it again. It's some small stuff we like to work on. For us, this is as important as the bigger movements we make. The details about it. Every layer of the process is actually important. Voilà. Thank you very much for your attention.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think you proved that totally right. I mean, the old houses you showed us were actually like something you would say, there is nothing to do about it. You know, you just tear them down and do something on your own. But you didn't. So for you, you took this as a challenge. And did really, really nice architecture. So probably it's true. You can do anything if you really want to, and then there is no bad architecture. Somebody else would have done something else, which is also legitimate, and so there's a whole range of possibilities. And I think in all your projects, it's already there. I mean, though you're the same authors all the time, but there's always an approach that is so individually taken by the circumstances. Oh, this is really fascinating. Yeah, but the questions is for you to ask. Somebody? Yes.
Are you kind of obsessed with the shape of your architecture? I don't know, it felt like you always create something that unfolds. Is there a story behind it, or is it just one of your favorite geometrical forms or shapes?
What we like about it is that it helps us to give an answer to a certain problem. So we never do it just because of the shape, because then it wouldn't stick. Clients would see the design and they would ask, why isn't the shape like this? Or wouldn't it be nice if it's a little bit more like this? So it's only when they hear the reasons why the shape looks like it is, that especially this kind of architecture, it only sticks when it has really, really good reasons, and not just one or two. So what we try to do is come up with all the things, all the questions we have to give an answer to, and most of the time it's like 5 or 6 problems. And then we try to find this one shape, this one solution that gives an answer to all of these problems. And very often we find that in different shapes. But we also felt that in those shapes, you have to keep in mind that people have to live in there. So if everything's crooked, it wouldn't work. And we found a way, which works really well for us, that we work with very geometrical shapes. But we use those, to switch them, to let the light in, to give the people a certain vision. And also what we like is if you see the project from the outside, it's not that first of all you see shape. This is us being architects showing you the shapes, for instance. But if you pass by these houses, it's not that you see a very strange shape immediately or something.
Well, first, before asking my question, I wanted to congratulate you because it's an amazing work, yours. And a good lecture because you make things easy where it's not easy at all. Each project, we work with a client, with regulations, with a budget, construction company, workers. And I think all of them at some point seem to be there to ruin our ideas. So we have to fight all the time. And you speak very easy about the projects, like everything is easy when I'm sure it's not. But the result is there. We have to fight to get the best from the worst sometimes. And going back to your architecture, I see it coming from this Belgian scene, architecture scene that from the recent years is pushing so hard in different studios. And always I see the work of the Belgian practices. I think of a word like grammar or syntax in the architecture, the way you treat with the regular elements like a door, a beam, a loft, and you try to work with that to make something else. A door is a door but can be something else. A loft is a loft but can be something else. But the important thing of that, I think, is the idea behind it. The title of your conference is from thought to matter. I think it's very important, and we keep repeating here in the class, that the importance of having an idea, knowing what you want to do before starting to do it. I keep saying that the architecture is the encounter between humanism and technique. We can have our minds in the heaven, but our feet on the ground. So it's two very complicated things, something to explain. And see you do it really good, these things. Well, this is like an appreciation of your lecture. Now my question is much more pragmatic, and it's about how do you do that? How do you go from the idea to the detail? Being two in the studio, do you have a method? Do you always work the same thing? One of you is normal in the studio, another in the construction site. How do you do it?
That's actually the big thing about how we work. Every design you see, we did it together. We are in dialogue continuously. So we design, we sketch together. Once we have an idea or a thought this could work, one does the 3D, the other do the model, then we bring it back together, we evaluate it. So this is the first point. And this is actually what happens continuously, even after, so we never stop evaluating the projects. Like you say, from thought to matter, having an idea is one thing, building it is another. You have a lot of processes in between. You have to convince your clients, you have to convince the building regulation, so you have to control the budgets, find sometimes one who wants to build it, convince them to do it in a normal fashion financially. So there's a lot of things going on, and even then we always have to continue dialoguing, because sometimes it's too expensive. What we want to change, so do we gonna turn it around, do something else? Or just you're going to do small alterations. The idea is never to give up, because if you give it up, you get only a fragment of what you meant. And by changing it and dialoguing continuously, you can always lift it up to the next level. This is actually a big challenge in the whole process, but hopefully it gives the right results.
Also, our experience is that you have to be able to compromise. But what we believe is it cannot look like a compromise. So every design we showed you, if you would show you the first design, it would look totally different. But we are changing design constantly. Every time we get a throwback because the budget is not enough, or the guy who has to build it, he can't do it. Every time you go back to the drawing table and you start over again. So it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it takes 5 models to make or 5 designs to make until you get this end result. And even when we are building it already, we are still evaluating, making new models, deciding other materials. And such as, for instance, in the Loft, when the guy decided all of a sudden to paint everything white, we were shocked. There goes our design, we thought, because one of the key elements for us was this old loft with the red brick. But then, okay, then you start rethinking it. Okay, what can we do? Then we wanted to do it in wood, the curtain. It was too expensive. We couldn't find the veneer to fold it. Okay, then you start to relook again, and then we find this technique they actually used, which works really well at the end result. But we would not have gotten that end result if we would not have had all these throwbacks, and if we would not have consistently start over again and start and look for this. So the fight that you are speaking of is actually something that we have to do every day. We try and not look at it as a fight, more as a dance or something like that, just to keep up the good spirit. But sometimes it feels like fighting, and sometimes it feels like being in flow.
But from the other hand, like you have new constructions and refurbishments, we love that because one influences the other. We also like, if a client says to you, okay, it's a new construction and there's no budget, do whatever you want, you need something to, how do you say, not fight against, but you need some restrictions somewhere. Nothing worse than do whatever you want for us. And the same thing is with budgets or with setbacks and something else. So working with all these items actually stimulates your creativity, and you end actually somewhere else where you thought in the beginning of the project. And usually if you think and dialogue enough about it, you end something good. And this information, you take it for another project and another project. And so there's a connection, how we say, een kruisbestuiving. Yeah, whatever. Something. Yeah.
I find quite interesting what you're saying about restrictions, because I also think that if you can do everything, you don't know what to do. When you have limits, you can find another freedom. I always say as an example what the writers like Georges Perec and Raymond Queneau were doing in the 60s. They were looking for another freedom in writing, and they decided to write with no A, or without an O. And they found new freedom, new limits, putting themselves limits. That's curious, but I think that it's a good way to work. And I would also like to tell now here to the audience, because we've been 2 months working in the project and they're going back and forward and some of them start to be quite disparate. But as you say, a project is about that. It's like to do and to redo, to change and to go back and always keep the hope to do something good enough.
Well, and what is important about that, what we feel is that once you have had some success, and by success I mean some end result, I remember it as a student, you need to have this first aid to be confident to do it the next time again. Throwing away your project when you think it's just not good enough and redo it and redo it and redo it. Even when you are seeing this deadline, it's coming closer and closer, you still keep throwing away designs. Sometimes clients tell us the question, they call us Basil Kuhn, we've been waiting for several months now for the design. When can we see the first design? And then we say, yeah, we've been working. And then they come, okay, let's have a look at what you have so far. And we say, no, we can't do that because we cannot show you 10 designs that don't work, that don't fit together. We're still in the process, in the very frustrating process of searching. But then eventually you find it. And this is now a pleasant time for us to be working with our architecture because we have some projects that we know we've done it before, so we just have to continue to look for it. Even with our team, everybody knows, again, this budget problem, again, the stupid client who wants to change something because he didn't understand it. And you still have to believe in it. We've been there before.
Some projects are really easier. The one where the cluster of buildings that really looked old, so there was a really easy one, flowed really easily out of the pen. The other one, the copper house, was a really difficult one. We struggled a long time. And I think after all the hours we worked, we talked to colleagues and they say, and the amount of hours you worked on that project, we build a house. We design it, and we build it. Depends, but if you're not happy with the results, you don't think that's the right answer, you continue working, looking for it.
It took us 200 hours just to get the first preliminary, first design of the copper house. And it was the only idea we had. We tried everything with his program and with the connecting rooms and all of that and the shed and... But so when we went present him this house, we could say, this is it, according to us, this is it.
There's no other answer for us.
We've tried everything, we didn't like it, and this one we really like. Then you show it to the client and you're like, let's hope he likes it. Luckily, he liked it.
You're as nervous as them.
Yeah, even more
Usually
nervous.
they are nervous when they come in. What kind of design will it be? And we are as nervous because, you know, this is what it should be. And
then the client likes it. Then you have to pass legislation. They often don't like it. Then you have to start. Then you have to pass by the budget. Even more difficult. And that's why the concrete house took so long to build. First, as you said, they didn't allow us to build, so we had to proceed 2 times. Okay, so then we finally got the permit. We were able to build it. Then we started calculating. It was too expensive, so again we couldn't build it.
No, we got our calculation, but the prices that came in were 3 times more expensive than we are calculated. Yeah. So at the end, we found somebody who did it. He worked for us, did concrete parts of buildings, a beam with a column. And then he started doing this, a whole building in concrete. Never done it for him before, so it was a big risk, but it worked well. Now he's doing only concrete buildings. We made his career.
And he's very expensive now.
Yeah. So
we got one. So it's a struggle. And we believe you need to aim high because otherwise these less interesting projects, they are also a struggle. But then it's not worth it. It's a shitty job sometimes because of all the problems. So you might as well try and go for the aim high. That's what we do.
It's pleasant.
Is it with me? No. They're laughing outside.
Nice filter, huh?
Is it streaming outside? No. Okay.
I have one more question. I didn't want to out the micro, but I have one more. Just move by curiosity. Normally when a client knock on our door, he usually likes something we have done when something is finished, it was thought 2 years ago, maybe. And normally our head is going in other things. So do the clients find what you were expecting in your project?
I'm not quite.
I think I understand.
I think I understand, but I'm not quite sure. Is it the idea that?
I mean, for example, a client could have seen your loft,
Yeah.
and then you were doing a refurbishment
Yeah.
that is absolutely different. And do they choose you by your style?
No, that's the thing. Once they come, they see projects, and the reason why we have these clients, sometimes they go to different studios, and with us, what they see is that we do something else every time. So the only thing they are sure of is that it won't be the same as something that we did before. Some clients love that idea. It's more adventurous, of course, and some clients prefer to have a sort of a style and go to an architect that's, even though they like what we are doing, they prefer to be sure about what they are going to get. And we always say, yeah, we don't know what we're going to do with your house or with your building or with your office. I know it's going to be cool, we hope it, but we don't know what it's going to be.
And it's not going to be like the next one, like the previous one, but because we've already done that one. So.
If they come with this loft and we want something like this, like it can't be something like this because the situation will be different. Everything will be different. You will have more windows, it will be higher, your budget will be different, there will be other restrictions that make that it can't be the same answer. And that's what we think about. It's strange to have a generic solution to something because everything is different.
But it's true that clients are quite nervous when they are in the beginning at our office. They are quite nervous to give us the assignment because of they're not really sure what they will get. And then we have to reassure them that if the first design is not spot on, yeah, we'll continue to design. It is possible. But we cannot promise what we will deliver. The concrete house, for instance, the one with the V-shape, the guy was really sure he wanted a really nice, wide, horizontal volume, 2 boxes. He said it in the beginning.
I want
This is what I want. Will you design me this? And in that phase, we were like, we are willing to design an interesting white cube. Yeah. And I think he's happy. Right.
He's really happy. He followed this
happy.
the whole way through. The only thing we discussed a lot about is that we want a polished, not polished, but a terrazzo, and he wants just a concrete floor. That's the only thing he didn't follow us. For the rest, he followed us the whole way through. And in contrast of what he wanted, sometimes people want just a straight block, and the one GVC, he wanted a straightforward house. Nothing bent, and then we did this open thing. Yeah, he was really happy, but you have to convince him why he should do this. It shouldn't be just a formal thing, and that's what we're trying to explain, of course, in such a lecture. That it's nothing about a formal thing. It has to be a solution, an answer, a reaction. It has to be legitimate. Otherwise, it's just why do this, and the next time we're going to work with circles and then with.
It's not an interesting business plan to try and do something else every time. It's not good marketing. If people come to your office and you have to sell them, we don't know what we are going to do for you. People are a bit strange, like, But on the other hand, we only need about 6 projects a year to survive as a studio, or that's what we want. With our team of 7 people, we need 6 projects. So what we do is we have lots of first meetings with clients, see what works, have talks with them, and then eventually you find those clients that understand what you're doing and that are going for it.
One of the small projects I explained, the budget was really small. So we didn't choose the clients for his budgets, but because it felt good to work with him. Hey, with his wife too. So the criteria what you choose your project is because you wanted to do it. And of course there's an economical question about it. So how many times, how many hours can you put into that? But we know that's the 6 projects we have, and we balance it well with some bigger, some smaller. We know that we can put the energy into that, and we don't want to make a difference between a small one and a big one. They all deserve to have the same amount of time put into that. So there's no hierarchy in better or bests, or for us that's important as a philosophy about the office. We can also do a shed, a small shed that maybe cost 100,000 euros and put as much effort as a house of 1 million euros. Yeah. Okay.
Friday night, right?
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Time to have a drink.